Ladies and gentlemen, my name is GamerZach, and welcome to Civilization 6 being announced very suddenly and out of the blue. And I swear, developers announce and release games just to mess with top 10 lists talking about games in upcoming years, because of course Civilization 6 would have gone in my top 10 strategy games to watch in 2016, but well, of course, there was no indication that such a thing was in the works. Anyway, the trailer went up along with a few details. And the trailer is very ominously narrated by Sean Bean, known best for dying. But let's hope Civilization 6 doesn't die off like many of his characters. Anyway, let's have a look at Civilization 6 and what's interesting about it and whether or not you should be excited for it. Now, of course, I myself am a huge Civilization fan, but we should never get ahead of ourselves and let the hype get the better of us. So let's get the facts out of the way first and foremost. The game is being sold in a standard and deluxe edition, of course it is, ranging somewhere between the prices of $60 to $80 or your regional equivalent, depending on which version you buy. The deluxe edition says it comes with the soundtrack, 4 DLC packs with an asterisk, which should be including things like map scenarios, civilizations, and leaders, and things like that. So right from the get-go, the game is already sort of cut up into a few pieces, as is expected with any AAA game today, but it is still no less disappointing and annoying. Now, Firaxis seems to be building upon Civilization 5. Now, this might be good news to some and bad news to others, because a lot of people still really like Civilization 4 more than they do 5. So taking 5 and building upon it and improving it might solve the problems you have with it, or it might be leading the game down in a direction that you are not happy with, as it might be moving further away from 4. But a very important note is the lead designer on Civilization 6 is Ed Beach. Now, if you don't know who Ed Beach is, Ed Beach was the designer for Gods and Kings and A Brave New World for Civilization 5. And if you didn't know, Civilization 5 Vanilla was actually, well, a little lackluster until those expansions came along. So Ed Beach being in charge of Civilization 6 is definitely a good thing. But let's look at the Steam page and see what the special features really are. What's actually new with Civilization 6? So first of all, we have what they're calling expansive empires. Now this is more of a modular approach to your city building within Civilization. So instead of having one sort of central sprawling city, each tile around your city can be sort of assigned to a specialty. So for example, you can have a science tile or a military tile. So this is a very modular approach to city building, and it's been stated, for example, that mountain tiles would be useful for science because of, stargazing and astronomy and all of that, but it's also useful for a faith focus. And this is something that, well, I don't know, it's sort of I feel kind of neutral about that because, well, on the one hand, I really liked having a central sprawling city, and in reality, cities tend to work both ways. I mean, sometimes cities have a focus in terms of the districts around them. Like you can have a university sort of district, or you could have a science and technology focused district. But some cities are just a sprawling mess. Though gameplay-wise, this does allow you to focus a bit more and to take advantage of the terrain you start with. And this might solve a lot of problems in terms of having quote-unquote bad starts in Civilization. Because whatever you start with, you should be able to focus appropriately based on the resources and terrain you have around you and adapt to whatever you get. So hopefully this helps eliminate the whole bad starts thing. I mean, it can't be as bad as, for example, in Civilization 2, if you started without a river nearby, you could never build any irrigation. But Civ 5 had its issues as well. Then the next thing that they're talking about is active research. Now, this is something where your civilization is meant to learn by doing. So instead of opening up the tech tree and just clicking on the tech you want to get eventually and it auto-researching on its way, different technologies will research faster based on the activities that you are doing with your civilization. So for example, if you want to learn masonry faster, building a quarry will actually speed up your research progress towards learning masonry. If you want to get seafaring and all those other nautical technologies, then having a city on the coast does actually help into discovering those technologies faster. Now this again does feel a lot more natural, and it makes sense. I really like this change in how the research is becoming more involved, because research in Civilization has always been sort of a click it and forget it sort of thing. And this also seems to be going into the dealing with the bad start sort of situation, and also allowing your civilization to be more adaptable. Because if you start, for example, with a lot of quarries nearby, then you can decide to rush for masonry and construction and bridge building, which allows you to get certain wonders before others. So looking at the terrain around you and deciding how to take advantage of it is actually going to significantly impact your civilization. And if you know how to take advantage of the terrain, then you should be able to turn any terrain to your advantage. So I really do hope it works like that. Next on their list is dynamic diplomacy. Now, diplomacy in Civilization has always been rather shallow. It's sort of been a give a tribute sort of thing and declare war, declare peace, invade someone's land, steal their worker, and then just declare peace immediately after. It doesn't really make sense. But there's one thing that they have added into diplomacy which does seem interesting. How it works in practice is to be seen. But apparently each leader is going to be assigned a secret agenda at the start of the game. So they do, of course, mention Gandhi, because everyone sort of talks about Gandhi being a trigger-happy nuclear bomb enthusiast. But honestly, I think in the past, although leaders do have their sort of base traits, I think it sort of stands out with Gandhi more, because Gandhi has been known to be this very significant symbol for peace. So whenever Gandhi in Civilization does anything remotely warlike, it seems a lot more extreme than it is. But this secret agenda is randomized. So although in Civilization 6, each leader will have their sort of personality traits set to them, their secret agenda will allow them to behave in certain ways that you can only discover from observing them or spying on them and actually paying attention to what they're building. And of course, depending on their start locations and how each civilization takes advantage of the terrain and resources around them, that should significantly impact how certain civilizations progress and behave. So if Gandhi started, for example, near a bunch of horses, he could quite easily get into a very mobile early military, and that would make sense. But it doesn't have to be the choice that leader makes. He could, of course, also start next to a lot of coastline and decide to go a very naval route, which then could be exploratory or military, or even have an economic focus. Anyway, the next point is combined arms. So one major change that Civilization 5 sort of implemented was that each unit or each military unit could only be on one tile, and you couldn't stack units. And although that sort of solved some problems, it also caused others. And this combined arms thing is sort of expanding on the one unit per tile design, but having certain kind of support units able to be stacked or linked to primary units. So for example, siege weapons could be linked to an infantry unit, because a siege weapon really doesn't move by itself. It doesn't act on its own. It usually is associated with some other units protecting it or pulling it along. Now the effect this can have is probably make sieging and attacking cities a lot more realistic and manageable, because one major problem I have noticed in Civilization 5 is that when you're attacking a city, because you can only have one military unit per tile, your entire army could be very easily backlogged up very far behind, and it becomes very congested on the battlefield. They also said that similar units could be combined to form a more powerful core unit. So depending on your military approach, it might be better to focus on building one specific kind of unit that you can continually stack into more powerful combined units, rather than diversifying. But you also don't want to overly focus on a single kind of unit, because that of course makes you easy to be countered. Anyway, next point, enhanced multiplayer. Now, multiplayer in Civilization 5 has been traditionally very difficult. I mean, they could easily take a day or even multiple days to finish a single session. So what they're doing now is they're adding in more game modes and more ways to play the game in terms of co-op and competitive. And they specifically mentioned 1 or 2 hour meaningful sessions. Now, I'm not sure if they're able to make 1 or 2 hour Civ sessions meaningful. I mean, the whole just one more turn addictive nature of Civilization is a thing. So can you really get a satisfying outcome after just playing a couple hours of Civilization? Especially in multiplayer. But they did say there's going to be some specific scenarios, for example, starting in the medieval era and playing up until Renaissance, with specific diplomatic or religious or military goals. So these custom scenarios might be able to create a meaningful session, but I still think it remains to be seen whether or not you can actually be satisfied in some way after playing Civilization for such a short period of time. So what all these improvements are meant to be building towards is so that there is no one particular metagame or one particular technique that's best for every game. So for example, now a lot of people are saying, oh, build 4 cities, don't go too much higher than that. Play like this, play like that, and you'll get the best outcome. You know, rushing the great library every single time. That sort of thing. They don't want that anymore, and they want gameplay to be a lot more emergent and adaptable, and to really have a different experience in every game and not to have a metagame that settles in a very boring and singular manner. And the Steam page wraps up by calling it a Civ for all players, saying Civilization 6 provides veteran players new ways to build and tune their civilization for the greatest chance of success. New tutorial systems are designed to introduce new players to the underlying concepts of Civilization so they can easily get started on a path to victory. Now, of course, saying this thing is for everyone never makes any sense, and of course it's completely untrue. But I think what they're trying to say is that this Civilization is supposed to make all Civ players happy. And again, I don't think that is remotely possible. But besides the features mentioned, you know what I want? I want Sean Bean to narrate a quote for every technology discovered. I also want a special fancy 3D animation for every wonder I build. And while you're at it, compose a song that's as good as Baba Yetu. And you know what? I want live action advisors back. Can we get those back? That'd be cool. Well, let's talk about some issues that there might be with Civilization 6. So first of all, there is the art style. And this is something that's sort of sticking out for a lot of people, because they're going in this sort of low poly, cartoony, well, more cartoony art style. And although this doesn't seem to be sacrificing complexity or depth in terms of the gameplay, taking the visuals in this direction is a very specific aesthetic decision that could sort of indicate the mood of how the mechanics will work. Now, Age of Empires Online went in this direction, and it got a lot of criticism for it, but I actually think low poly worked well with Age of Empires Online, because Age of Empires Online was a lot more like Age of Empires 1 than anything, and Age of Empires 1, it originally had many cartoony aspects. I mean, for example, villagers carrying oversized pieces of meat. But Civilization has been slowly going in the more realistic direction over time. But let's not forget that it had very cartoony and humorous aspects rooted in its history. I mean, just think back to the advisors in Civ 2, or many of the jokes through Leonard Nimoy's quote narration in Civilization 4. I personally don't put too much priority on the visuals. And although many people are saying it's starting to look like a mobile game or it just doesn't look good, I don't think it's at that point quite yet. I don't think it looks that bad. And honestly, we're currently in the age of more vibrant video games. I mean, just think of the games that are coming out right now. I mean, Overwatch, Battleborn, all the pixel art games coming out like Hotline Miami 2 and Stardew Valley. I mean, we are past the whole muddy, dark, gritty, brown, overbloomed age of the mid to late 2000s, and having some vibrant colors and a brighter aesthetic might actually be a nice aspect of the new Civilization. However, it looking a little bit more like Goddess doesn't help anyone's impressions either. Besides that, there has been no mention of world events, and this is something that a lot of people have been asking for a while, and it would actually make sense. For example, volcanic eruptions, ice ages, meteors striking, floods, earthquakes, etc. World events in the real world do have significant political and cultural effects on the world. And I think it would be a fantastic addition to the Civilization series. I mean, it could be a feature, but nothing has been mentioned so far, so we're probably not going to be seeing it. I mean, that's something that they would put in the new features list. And it's not there, so at the moment I'm going to assume that there aren't going to be world events. So some people are hoping that the visuals will be changing from what we've seen in the screenshots released so far, and I can pretty confidently tell you that nothing is going to change with how the game looks. I mean, the game is releasing in less than 6 months, which is practically no time at all for them to make any major changes. Though I do prefer the new cover art over the last one. It's a bit more minimal, but the Civilization 5 cover art was just one big giant mess, which I did tell them looked like a big giant mess with no focus, but once the cover art is revealed on these AAA games, it's very difficult to get them to change it, though in some cases it is of course possible. But the new Civilization 6 cover is quite minimal, has that sort of motivational poster sort of approach, and I'd prefer this over a mess any day. Now of course the question of pre-ordering does come up, and I'm going to tell you to not pre-order it. I mean, just remember Civilization 5 being quite buggy, and then of course Beyond Earth. I don't think I have to say more about that. So please don't pre-order. I don't see any pre-order bonuses either, so there's literally no reason to. Even if you want the Deluxe edition, just buy it later. I mean, there's really no rush at all. We've barely seen anything. I mean, a trailer narrated by Sean Bean is cool, but I'd wait till we see some gameplay not released by Firaxis or 2K. You know, how about we try this? Instead of pre-purchasing the game, how about you wait 24 hours? No, just wait 6 hours after launch. Wait 6 hours after launch. And have a look at some of the reviews, have a look at some of the gameplay, and if it still looks good, you can buy the game after 6 hours after launch on October 21st, 2016. I mean, it's Civilization, nothing's gonna be spoiled or anything like that. You know, show 2K that we don't just buy things because it comes out with the same title. Alright, and that's pretty much Civilization 6 as it stands. The game will be releasing on October 21st, 2016 for around $60 to $80 depending on your region and whether or not you get the Deluxe edition. Meanwhile, Steam seems to be having massive sales for other Civilization titles right now, so if you're wanting to play some Civ before October, you can check those out. Alright, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.